Good evening, everyone. I'm Reverend Melinda Luty, and welcome to MCC Baltimore's Meditative Moment and Bible Study this evening. So, if you could all join me for a brief meditative moment. First, I need to apologize for our lateness. We were having some technical difficulties, but we hope that we have them all worked out. So, now if you'll join me for a brief meditative moment, this is just to help you relax and get rid of the stuff from the day so that you can concentrate on our Bible study. All right? So, make yourself comfortable however you're comfortable. I'm going to admit I'm sitting in a chair, got my feet squarely on the floor, put my hands on my knees because that's how I'm comfortable when I do this. All right? And then I just want you to close your eyes and I want you to take a big breath in and hold it. And now breathe it out. And now, when you take another breath in, I want you to think about breathing in new air and new life. Okay? Hold that. And now breathe out. And as you breathe out, think about letting the old things go, letting the concerns and the cares of the day go. Just allow yourself to relax. And now take a couple more. And while you're taking these breaths, I want you to concentrate on listening to what's going on around you, listening to the sounds. And since your eyes are closed, you can listen more and maybe concentrate with your mind's eye. Okay? Now, I just want you to do a couple more so that you can relax and just let it go so that you can concentrate tonight. All right. And now I'm going to ask that you come back and join us as we prepare for our Bible study tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to our own Minister Ray, who will be our facilitator for this evening.
Thank you, Reverend Melinda, for that meditative moment. And I hope everyone is ready for our Bible study tonight. So before we get started, I would first like to read our MCC Baltimore's Bible study disclaimer. And it states, Metropolitan Community Church of Baltimore is an open and affirming ministry. The views, opinions, positions, or strategies expressed during our Bible study are not necessarily reflective of everyone in attendance or of Metropolitan Community Church of Baltimore. Metropolitan Community Church of Baltimore is not responsible for any legal actions or adverse consequences that might arise from a person's attendance and or comments during Bible study live on Facebook or any other form of social media. We will now have our MCC Baltimore's Bible study mantra. So if you could get your sword, I am using my electronic tonight. Reverend Melinda is also using her electronic one tonight. So if you have your book or your phone, please read along with me if you are able. The Bible consists of many inspiring accounts about God. However, it is not God. Therefore, I will use the Bible as one of many tools towards spiritual formation and growth in my life. However, I will never use the Bible to harm me or hurt others. I will not allow the Bible to limit my understanding of who God is, what God can do, and who God can use, knowing that the words of God are still being written, even through me. I emphatically believe that God loves, God liberates, and God extends grace to us all, and upon this belief, I embrace biblical engagement. Next, we will have our MCC Baltimore's Bible study prayer. Let us pray. Heavenly Parent, let the discussion tonight make room for the God within to transform us and those listening. May we be open to what it is that you have for us to learn this evening. May our discussion allow each of us to become our best selves. In your many names we pray. Amen. And tonight we will be discussing the Linton book study, 24 Hours That Changed the World by Adam Hamilton. And this is session 7, our last session from this book. And it is titled Christ the Victor. And if you have the book, we will be reading from pages 135, discussing from pages 135 to 153. So let us get started. All right. Okay. So, Reverend Melinda, would you do our opening prayer from the book? Oh, you're muted.
See, I always do that. This is from Psalm 98, verses 1 through 3. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm have gotten him victory. The Lord has made known his victory. He has revealed his vindication in the sight of the nations. He has remembered his steadfast love and faithfulness to the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the victory of our God.
Oh, I'm muted. All right. Our biblical foundation comes from the book of Mark, chapter 16, verses 1 through 6. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, who will roll the stone away for us from the entrance to the tomb? When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here." So this is our biblical foundation for lesson 7. And we know that from our previous studies, we found out last week we spoke about the crucifixion, and all that it entailed, as far as the things that Jesus had to go through during this time. And again, as a reminder, this has been 24 hours. And I say that because I know sometimes and this book has made me really think, we don't think about the length of time from when Jesus was taken on Thursday after the Last Supper, and was basically taken and then taken to Caiaphas's house, the Roman governor, and the Sanhedrin, also did not want Jesus to do the things that he was doing. And they, went to Caiaphas and, basically said Jesus was trying to overthrow the Roman government, which was, was not true. Um, and as we have gone through this book, like I said, we've seen the progression of things that happened. And remember, this was a 24-hour period. So the reason why I believe that the reason why they did this so quickly is because Passover was starting um, on Saturday. So Jesus, after he, while he was still on the cross, as I read the book, while he was still on the cross, they wanted to break, they informed the guards to break the legs of the people who were being crucified, who were not dead yet, to hasten their death so that they could be buried, because this all had to be done before Passover started. And again, this when he was on the cross at about 3 o'clock is when he passed. So between 3 and 6, they had a very short window of dealing with the bodies of the crucified people. So they were instructed to break the crucified's legs. But when the guards went to Jesus, they saw that he had already passed away. So let me just move this for 1 second. So we know that, actually, you know what? Let me pause for a moment. And I just want to bring up the key insights that we'll be talking about before we get into the lesson. One of it was the practice of using rock burial sites made sense in Palestine because arable land was so scarce and the rock beneath the surface was soft. The rock tomb in Megiddo is one of the few still in existence and clearly shows how difficult it would have been to roll back the stone once it had been set in place. The chapel shrines that contain small pieces of stone encased in glass believed to be from the tomb of Jesus is the last station of the cross. And in contrast, the red square where Lydia's preserved body lies encased in glass. So let me move on. Inside the garden tomb, you can see that one of the two burial plots is unfinished, leading to the speculation that the tomb was never completed after Jesus was resurrected. And John recounts that Jesus was buried and first seen by Mary Magdalene in the garden, clearly alluding to Jesus' restoration of the original Garden of Eden. So these are some of the key insights that we will get into in our lesson. But again, Passover was starting. So Joseph of Arimathea, who was a Jewish man, a rich man, and believed to be a follower of Christ. And he was one of the few people in the council, in the Sanhedrin, who did not agree with what they were doing. He did not want to see Jesus crucified. So he went to Pilate to ask for Jesus's body, and Jesus was actually buried in a tomb that was meant for Joseph. And the reason, sorry, Reverend Melinda, do you have anything to say?
Nope, I'm listening to you.
Okay. So the reason why, if you've been following along in the book, that Joseph of Arimathea was so important in this moment is because it was believed that the people who were followers of Christ were poor and not very smart, because of some of the I would say, professions and some of the things that they were dealing with. They were the marginalized people, so they weren't very rich. Jesus was with the prostitutes and the drunkards and things like that. So they didn't think that anybody of means would want to follow Jesus. But Joseph Arimathea did. Um, and like I said, Christ was believed to be buried in what would have been Joseph of Arimathea's grave. Um, and before then, as we all know, the disciples have scattered. Right after it happened, some they believe watched from afar the crucifixion, but most were away. So I wanted to talk about some of the images that we have talked about in our 7 lessons. So recall some of the sites that you have seen these last few weeks: the Garden of Gethsemane, the pit beneath Caiaphas's house, the whipping post, the stone pavement, the stone of unction, and the garden tomb. How has seeing these sites and objects informed your understanding of what Jesus means to you and for the world? And I have a few of those right here. So, excuse me, right up top, we have the Garden of Gethsemane, where we know this is where Jesus went to go pray. Once he realized what was happening. So this was Thursday. So Jesus, prayed. Basically, he didn't want to go through what he knew he had to go through. We discussed the pit, and this is where this is the pit under Caiaphas's house, and this is where Jesus was taken to. I know, Reverend Melinda, when you did your lesson, you did have the stone pavement. And this was the walk that Jesus had to take from where he was staying to Caiaphas's home, which I remember we said was about a 20-minute walk.
20 minutes to half an hour, I think they said.
Yeah. So
and he did that walk barefooted.
Barefoot. So he walked barefoot, to here in this pit. And I know that I always assumed that when Jesus was waiting, it was like a jail cell, somewhere to sit, probably stoned, but just somewhere. But this is where he was. It was basically a pit with, as you can see, like no room. So, yeah, so a pit. And so Jesus had been beat and whipped and had not had any rest as the day progressed, and then carrying the cross up to, which I assumed was a hill. It was not. He was definitely very, very, as we learned last week with Minister Joe, he was very, very close to, for all to see. So, my imagination growing up, and still probably until last week, was that this was a hill and the people were away. But we learned that people were like 3 feet away, and he could see them. They could see him. The stone of unction is where it is believed that, I lost my place. I do apologize. Reverend Melinda,
I believe the stone of unction is where they believe he was actually crucified.
Yes,
if I remember correctly.
Yes, and this is,
and it's actually
inside the chapel.
It's inside a chapel, inside a church. Remember, that was where I had the big building with the little building inside of it.
Yes. And this is where some people kind of go, they're not supposed to, they kind of go under to be near the stone.
Right.
So these are just a few of the images that we have seen over the past few weeks. And Reverend Melinda, I know the question I asked was, how has seeing these images, changed your view of Jesus' 24 hours?
I'm going to tell you, I was amazed by some of the things that I've learned because, like in the Garden of Gethsemane, there's olive trees there that were probably there when Jesus was there praying. It's just they were much younger. There are olive trees there that are over 3,000 years old. And when I learned that, I was like, what? And then I didn't realize how ugly olive trees were. Okay. I thought they were this like nice, pretty tree or whatever until I don't eat olives. Okay. I'm like you, the pit that was actually the prison amazed me. And to think that in that pit, Jesus was probably not the only one there. You know, then the different places, like the rock where he prayed, and the fact that it's covered and designated, and then the stones where he was crucified, the path that he walked, to see all those things really made me think about how all that he had gone through in this short time period in 24 hours. It was just like seeing the pictures kind of brought it to life for me. It was all just amazing to me, all the different things that we saw, the whipping post, and then in doing some of the research, learning the different types of whips that they used. And one of the things that I found interesting too was all the different things that we just took for granted, and like the fact that the people were so close when he was crucified, and the fact that, as well as being so close, like he could literally see their eyes and they could see his, so they could really see all of that fear, all of that emotion that he was going through, and he could see theirs. It was just amazing to me. I mean, to think that somebody was 3 feet away. And then the fact that when you see crosses, and when you're driving, you'll see 3 crosses on the side of the road, and they're real tall. So you're thinking Jesus was crucified on one of these high crosses. And I was like, to think that his feet were probably only 3 feet off the ground was amazing to me. About what amazed me is how many misconceptions we had, and seeing the visual pictures of it was just amazing to me. And then I think Minister Joanne in her lesson last week showed us that they found things that showed that when you're nailed to the cross, when your feet are nailed to the cross, they're actually nailed on the side of the cross, separated. Whereas the image we've always had is that they're nailed with 2 nails, and the image we always had is with the feet together and only 1 nail going through them. It just I think all of the images that we saw this time around kind of really amazed me, because they were just things that I never took into consideration before. So I found them interesting and highlighting. Guys, I'm going to admit that I'm going to wing it. I'm trying to keep the conversation going. We've had some technical difficulties on Minister Ray's end, and I don't know exactly what's going on. So I'm going to hope that I can keep us going through this. But all of the images have just amazed me because of how they changed my perception of everything. Because I used to think I wasn't a visual learner, but now I'm learning that I am. So makes it different. The other thing is just as it changed me, I'm hoping that it changed different people who have watched this Bible study series. Did it change some of their perceptions? Did it made us really consider what was going on? There we go. She's back. I've been trying to hold it together and talking about
I've
everything
heard
with
you.
the visual images.
Thank you so much. I apologize, everyone. This weather has made my internet very, very wonky. So I apologize, but thank you so much, Reverend Melinda. I could hear you through the phone, but I couldn't get in. But yes, I heard about the images. I heard you talking about the cross and being, so being so close.
Right.
And that's kind of how I feel about, some of these images. Like I said a little while ago, I just always assumed that it was close. I mean, I'm sorry, not close, that it was far away. And, the people couldn't see the pain that not only Jesus, but the others that were being crucified that day, that they couldn't see their pain. And it's like, well, no, they really could. And I see a Facebook user, I'm not sure who it is, but it says it is amazing to see these images and to imagine what Jesus went through. And also it puts you right there, and it really does. Going to these seeing these images of these sites, you just can imagine, Jesus just being in these places and the things that were done to him, and how he was ridiculed and humiliated, and all these other things. And then to even after death kind of hastened into burial, because again, my image of what I think or what I thought the burial should have been. And I know they took care, but I just imagine like a long process, um of cleaning his body, putting oils on, wrapping him, doing those things. And they were, I firmly believe they were done with care, but I believe they still were hastened because of of Passover, and wanting these things to be done before Passover started. And I'll admit, I did not know that where Jesus was buried was not for him. And and honestly, I don't know who I thought it was for, and I don't know if my brain thought that it was just tombs all around for people to be placed in. I'm not sure. What do you think, Reverend Melinda?
I'm like you. I mean, I always knew it was somebody else's because it tells us it was in a borrowed tomb.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think about a tomb, I'm thinking about the fancy ones that you see, like if you're in if you're in a cemetery and the big ones that are all built up and everything. But to think that these were actually
Mausoleum.
carved out of rocks and carved out of the hillsides, I'm like going, wow. But then in the book it says that when it was rolled back into place, it was made in such a way that it would actually seal it tight. And I'm like going,
Mm-hmm.
okay, now I'm good and confused,
Right.
because
So, and I
I always
know,
figured it was, it kind of just laid against it, not that it kind of fit in.
yeah, and that's my image, and it's so amazing how you know we kind of get the same image from reading. Because yeah, I assumed it was just like kind of like if you put something in front of a door, you can kind of like nobody can really get in. It make like maybe small openings on the side, but not something that someone could just like go in and go out. um and I was thinking about um just the process of doing this, and
Well,
you know
and
the reason
it's kind of
why.
funny seeing the pictures of the tombs
Hmm.
made me think about, I don't know why, but I always pictured that it was a nice round rock stone that
Hmm.
sealed the tomb. And to see that tombs are actually oblong, taller than they are wide,
Hmm.
normally the doors to them, was like, wow, I'm kind of confused here.
Yeah, I definitely like I said, this book has been amazing. um so this is an image of what a tomb would look like. And as you can see, the stone would have been rolled in front of, which doesn't really give a lot of room for easily slipping out or slipping in. Um, so we have our image of what we think, but this is one of the images of a tomb. Um, but what amazed me about the book was, and this part was when the author talked about the day after, and the day after, and the day after Jesus was put in the tomb, and the disciples, and this is a image I found. um but it made me think about, as I was reading the book, what happens the day after. And in the book, he gives this whole list of the day after, the day after the verdict, the day after 9/11, the day after your spouse walks out, the day after you lose a job, like these day afters that we don't think about. um he just goes into this long list, and I know we probably all have our day after, where something has happened that is so unimaginable, that we don't know how we'll get through to the next day. So with the disciples, even in their disbursement, um and kind of, I like to use the word betrayal a little bit, of Jesus. They still mourned. This was their friend, their teacher, their guide, and someone who alluded to, maybe not in the words that they needed to hear, but told them that he wouldn't be with them forever. But when you are being, I'm going to assume, being fed so much every day, spiritually fed every day, you're seeing this man perform miracles and these things like that, that you don't think he'll ever leave. So they weren't prepared for the day after. And it is thought that they went back to the place where they had the Last Supper, and locked themselves in because they were scared. They were scared of the guards, or people coming after them. So I know in the book, and as I was listening to it, I did not have the book. I listened to it. Um, I got these images of what what were they saying to each other, like in between probably the tears and the maybe finger pointing. Like I just wonder what the conversations could have been in that moment, because if you've ever grieved someone, there are so many emotions. There's sadness, um, there's anger at the person, anger at the people around you, because why didn't they save the person? Just these irrational thoughts, because death is death. And whether it happens over a long period of time, that you are able to kind of come to terms with it. If someone is sick or something very tragic and happens in an instant, there is still this, it doesn't make the grief any different. And I wonder, were they pointing fingers at each other? Were they laughing about the good times? I just think about how um I have felt when a person that I loved has, transitioned and passed on, the emotions that I have felt. So I just can imagine um their their emotions, but also kind of feeling like they're stuck because they couldn't leave. Um they were
Yeah.
kind of stuck in, I believe, just stuck in this like loop of happiness, sadness, anger, happiness, sadness, anger, like whatever their emotions were. It was like probably just a circle all the whole day.
They probably went through the whole gambit,
Hmm.
especially fear. And I'm thinking not just
About
fear of
fear.
what could happen to them,
Yeah.
but fear of purely of the unknown. What can happen to us? What are we going to do without him to here to lead us?
Hmm.
How are we going to live? He told us we got to carry on. And it's like, and I'm like you, did they start pointing fingers?
Yeah.
Did they start blaming each other? Did because from the way I read it, it wasn't just the disciples who were gathered there. They had other
Mhm.
people with them.
Yeah.
Did those people point fingers and say, you guys should have done better? Pardon my English. But, you know, as well as trying to deal with their own loss, I mean, this was Peter's best friend, the one,
Hmm.
some of the disciples were his brothers,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
his mother, I've lost a son in such a tragic way. Um, it's just
Mm.
amazing to me because, you know, when you mourn a loss, but when you mourn not just the loss of a loved one, but the loss of your leader, the loss of who you believe in and who's the reason that you believe what you believe.
Right.
How tragic is that? And, did they just sit in the corner and cry and stay
Yeah.
away from each other even? There's
Yeah.
so many
There's so
because
much. Yeah.
the Bible doesn't tell us what they did.
No, and that's the thing. It's like they're just believed to have um kind of been in this room, and then I think at one point in the book they were remembering, he said, I wanted to remembering, when Jesus talked about Jonah being in the well for 3 days. And, did he say that he was going to come back in 3 days? Like this number three that probably was kept popping in their head was three of this and three of that. And, you know, did we hear that right? Like it was probably
Right.
an all day thing. Just like, but did I hear him say this? But no, I think he said 4, maybe, because when you don't think someone is going to leave you, you hear their words, but you don't expect not to hear them again, or did I misremember, what they said?
Right. It's like, is that true? Did he
Right.
really
Or am
say
I
that?
imagining this? Right. Am I imagining? Did he say, you know, is he going to come back? Because I thought he said he might, you know. One of our viewers said we never talk about the humanness of the PTSD from watching a traumatic event. No,
We
no.
don't.
Um,
But remember, basically, I always found this interesting, and one of the lessons that I taught, it was brought up that his disciples all deserted him
yeah,
except for Peter, and then Peter denied him.
yes. But
So
it
I
also
always, you know, when Adam Hamilton brought up, we look at what he did wrong, but he was the only one there.
right. He
And
can't.
I'm
But
like,
a lot of them, they say they watched from afar. So even if they weren't up close and personal,
what was
they
it
were
like
there.
to witness all of that?
Mary, his mother, was right there. You know, seeing, regardless of Jesus being the Messiah, Jesus was her son. And I know we talked about this last week. It's like, but that's still her son, regardless of his divinity. I mean, and she knows about his divinity, from day one,
Right,
day one of conception. But that does not negate the fact that she still mothered him for
right.
32 years. Um,
Well,
so
and
yeah.
the other thing is because it was so up close,
Hmm.
that would be really traumatic too. I
Hmm.
mean, look at with all the gun violence,
Hmm.
look at what it's done to the schools where
Yeah.
you have um,
Active
active
shooter drills.
shooter drills,
Mhm. Yep.
and we never thought we'd see our children having to go through that.
No.
But how has that changed their world? Just
Yeah.
like,
It's
I mean, we don't think about things on an individual basis, I think is what I'm trying to say. How did
right.
it
But I
change
also
each one as an individual?
right. But I also feel like depending on where you come into a situation, my children, that's all they've known. Um, when I was in high school, actually, before I graduated, Columbine happened. So we didn't have active shooters because this was like an anomaly. It's like it happened. We talked about it, as a school or maybe in a class. I can't remember, but it wasn't like this is going to happen again. Um, so I know you've also talked about having to do. Oh my goodness, uh, the drill that you had to do, Reverend Melinda.
The bomb threat.
Yes, the bomb. And in my elementary school, we had a bomb shelter, and I never knew what it was. I remember seeing the words bomb shelter, like in the basement. We had a restroom down there, and that's where one of my classes was. But I remember seeing it, and I was like, oh, that's where they keep bombs. Like in my brain, that's where they kept bombs, not where you would go if something happened. So, like you said, depending on if there was a bomb drill now, I believe that would traumatize children because
Because they're not
that's not what
used to
they
it.
know. That's not what they know. Um, versus like if they say, "Oh, we're now doing active shooter drills," like that would traumatize you because depending, like I said, depending on where you came in at. in your period of time, then um it would just be normal. And I wonder, because crucifixion being the norm, I definitely get the PTSD, because especially if it's someone that you personally know and personally love, but also this was kind of par for the course. So it wasn't different to be crucified, but also it still has to be traumatic. But I think, you get this level of desensitization. Desensitization?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the word. You get a level of that. Um, but yeah, I definitely just wonder what the disciples were thinking in that moment. Um,
Well,
so
and
uh
the other thing is just like you said, it was the norm for the day, and even people being whipped was the norm for the day. Because, like we brought up last week, what did the thieves steal that he ended up on a cross? You know, you're muted. Now you muted yourself back.
okay, unmuted. We don't know, and like I often sometimes wonder about um punishments for crimes depending on the period of time. Was it something as simple as stealing bread, or stealing from the temple, or stealing from a market? Um, I know that Barabbas murdered people. So it's like, what what, because even when we talked about Jesus last week, this wasn't even a set in stone plan. Like, they thought Jesus wanted to overthrow, but like nobody gathered any evidence. It's like you put him on trial, so to speak, and you really didn't. You put him on trial, but where's your evidence that this was the plan? Um, you, like I said, the whole crowd saying crucify him. It's like, who was the plant in the crowd, screaming crucify him, so that everybody else could say crucify him?
Minister Joanne said collective trauma for all those who were there.
I would definitely believe it, in varying levels of trauma, but trauma is trauma. Whether
Yep.
you're used to seeing it every day as the person who uh did the uh did the nailing. Like, we speak about, like, the executioner, at when they would hang people, like, at the gallows. That is still trying, even though that's that person's job. They have to do it day in and day out. Like, that has to take a toll.
Well, and actually, I just saw something on a news headline where a judge told the prison guards, just suck it up. That's your job. Your job
Wow.
is to do executions. And I'm thinking,
But there's a
wait a minute.
person behind that. Like,
I get that that's a job, but did you forget that they're human?
yeah,
Are
yeah.
you, and I wonder, I'd have been one of those people that would have looked at the judge and said, "Have you been there every time this has happened?"
And that's the thing. Some people get so far removed from the process of something, um, that they forget that the people dying are human, and the people who have to do the job, whatever the job is, that they're also human. They're not monsters, so to speak. This is
Right.
their job, but they're still people with feelings.
And I think that's what this book brought out the most for me, is the humanness of it all.
Mm, yeah,
How oftentimes we think of it as a story that happened way back then. And I mean,
Mhm.
look how many misconceptions we've discovered we had.
Yeah, I'm still I have not started my rabbit hole digging, but I'm I don't think Judas was a betrayer. And we've talked about this. I don't believe that Judas, and I'm going to stop saying people. I don't call people Judas, but you know what I mean. Like I think we should take that out of
Hmm.
our wording, because I do not believe that Judas, his actions were betrayal. I think he thought he was doing something to start Jesus's I'm not going to say taking over of the Roman Empire, but kind of he thought that he was catapulting, and he probably thought they weren't going to kill him. He probably said, well, they'll probably just throw him in jail and then we'll be behind him. And also, I know I discussed a few weeks ago, Judas probably also thought the disciples were going to be have his back, and they
Right.
ran. They legit ran. So I don't, and until I finish my rabbit hole digging at this moment, this day, I do not think Judas was wrong.
No, I think his
In a
intentions were good.
Yes, but will
I
no
also
change.
don't think that that the outcome that occurred was what he expected.
No, and that's what I'm saying. I do not think that what he thought was going to happen was the crucifixion of Christ. Christ knew that. Christ already knew, but and that's why I don't think Christ was he still gave Judas communion at the Last
Right.
Supper.
He still
Because
washed
he
his feet.
knew, I believe he knew that this was one of those things that had to happen. This is one of those moments for the prophecy to be fulfilled had to happen. Just like he
Right.
told Peter, "You're going to deny me." Peter's like, "Nah, no, how, why, I couldn't." And then what happens? He does, and this is out of humanness, fear of not knowing, what can happen, because self-preservation is a thing. Peter's like, I want to live another day. Um, so and he loved Jesus. We know that, but in the moment, he did exactly what Jesus said he was going to do.
Yep.
Um, yeah.
One of our viewers asked for the name of the book, so
Yeah.
Minister Joanne and I both have put it in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
It's 24 Hours That Changed the World by Adam Hamilton.
Yeah. It's a
Um,
it's an excellent.
and it's not expensive. It's on
Yeah.
Amazon. Go ahead and purchase it now, even though we're finishing our book study.
Hmm.
You will find everything just like we have.
Yeah.
We did more digging than we thought we were going to do.
Yes. Um. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was actually when Mary Magdalene um on Sunday morning, and they arose to go and anoint Jesus, and check on his body. And then when they get there, the stone is rolled away. And their first thought was that someone had came to defile his body and dehumanize him even more um than they had done. So their first thought was, what happened. Not that Jesus had risen, had resurrected. um so, and when we were talking about resurrection in the book, you know he talked about it being one of those things where you can't imagine it happening. you know um and he spoke about friends, well, a person, a book he read, and how this pastor was sick, and how he had been taken off of life support, and he could, before then, he could hear his, his family and his friends saying their goodbyes, and how he went into this place where he saw, was it an army buddy?
I don't remember.
I don't remember, but it was a friend. And, the friend telling him it's going to be okay. And he talked about another person who had like a near death experience, and how they heard music, that can only be described as heavenly music. Um, and, the thought of someone, dying and coming back is just, not really conceivable for us as humans. Um, and I believe this is why, and we'll get into Thomas a little later, but Thomas doubted, because this is not something that happens. Even though I want to say he was there when he raised Lazarus, um, but it was just not something that typically happened. Um, and even though Jesus was divine, I believe that the disciples knew he was divine, but they still saw his humanness more than his divineness. Even in the miracles, this was still he was still human. Um, so they did not believe, in the beginning, that
Right.
Jesus and other people, and I know that um Paul said that at least 500 people saw Jesus after he resurrected. And Jesus was, going around and having dinner and seeing people. So there are people who saw him after the resurrection, but it's probably they're probably still unsure, because even Mary, they ran away to
Right.
go, like, say, hey, he's not in there, but they didn't think he was like resurrected. They just thought something has happened. um you need to come with us, because this is not what's supposed to be.
Right. Because they were like, they took him. They took him.
Right.
I always found it interesting, though, that, and I know you haven't brought this up, but I've always found it interesting the pilot set a guard there.
Yes.
And it's like you've got all these people in fear because you just killed their leader, you just killed who they believe to be the Messiah,
Hmm.
but you're still fearful.
Hmm.
You put a guard in front of it.
Yeah. and
So it's like it's
and we don't.
interesting to me how much fear there was on both sides.
Right. And fear, yeah, I hear you, but it's like, even with the guard, it kind of reminds me of oh my goodness, name is escaping me. Oh no, I can't remember right now. Name is really escaping me, but he, got past the guards. um, and I wonder. I would like to hear the guards' point of view of what he saw. He probably didn't see anything. And like, what happened to the guard? Because I know the other guard was killed. I can't remember his name. Oh goodness. Um, it's a story about a guard who the prisoner got past him. Um,
Right.
yeah. Uh, but yeah, like, you go somewhere expecting one thing, and your mind is absolutely blown, because what could not have happened has happened. What should not have happened has happened. Um,
Right.
So that is, I wonder what who would I have been? I don't know, Reverend Millard, who would you have been? Like, would you have been like Thomas and doubted, or would you have, I know Mary, they kind of ran away, but they they went to go get somebody, but I think I would
But
be in
but
that.
remember, Thomas got the title of Thomas the Doubter
Mm.
because he didn't believe what they were telling him.
Yes.
The
Until
rest of them,
we
the rest of them got to see it and were telling him about it. So can we really blame him for doubting?
Well,
Because
no, it's something I would probably be, in his boat, or um when Jesus came around the disciples, I don't think I would be the first to talk
right,
or touch or ask, because in the back of my mind, I've I've betrayed you in a
right,
sense. Am I even worthy enough to speak to you? Because at your time of need, even though Jesus knew this was going to happen, at your time of need, I got ghosts.
right.
I went and hid, like, and I even as a disciple, I probably would have done the same thing. Um,
And and see, that's the catch. We never know, and we'll never know because we weren't there.
right.
I like one of the and I can just see one of our viewers has said, I always wondered why didn't all the believers band together and save Jesus, even though the scripture stated the lamb would be slain who was innocent of any crime? Why didn't the believers rise up even if they lost a fight? There should have been a windmill before the hill, and I can just see this person saying that. But
Yes.
I think
Yeah, well, see,
I
that's the
think it
thing,
all
because
goes back to the fear that they were living
yeah,
in. They didn't
and
realize. The other thing is what we fail to understand is they were already a put upon people.
mhm,
We often forget that they were already living in fear from the Romans and living in even probably living in fear from their own religious leaders.
right.
So they were already put upon. I think is the answer what to why they didn't band together, because they were scared. They were not necessarily the people who had money and the people who had power.
Hmm.
So they were used to standing back
Right.
and not um, putting up a fight. I think is the word I'm looking for.
Right.
So that's
And
why, to me, they didn't band together. The other thing is, if they had, we wouldn't have the. It wouldn't have turned out the way that it did, and we would have a whole different religion and a different belief.
I believe so, and I believe that the believers, the majority of the believers came after, because the disciples were able to go out and spread the word, the message. And even Jesus was able to meet Saul, who turned to Paul, um, on the road to Damascus, and changed his view, because Saul was also persecuting uh, Jewish people. So
Right.
they were the Jewish people, while the Romans were in power, the Jewish people were still being persecuted, um, even though they were kind of weren't doing their people very treating their people very well, because they were also if you did not have money, again, Reverend, if you did not have money, you, even at the temple, you weren't allowed in if you couldn't pay. So even as a Jewish person, you weren't allowed in the holy of holies. You were on the outskirts, and that's where you had the money changers, and that's where all this, what Jesus was upset about. you know why these people have to do these things? Why aren't they allowed in? Just because they're a prostitute, why aren't they allowed in the temple? They were temple prostitutes, but why? Because this person is different, they weren't not allowed in. So even amongst the Jewish people, there were people who were downtrodden. So again, I believe so. I believe that the followers were small in number at this time. Um, Now, the people that were following Jesus, again, were probably in town because of Passover. So it's possible, but again, this is not what was supposed to happen. So I think they gained more strength and power after Jesus's death and resurrection because they, in a sense, had something to believe in, a person
Right.
to believe in, versus the miracles that had been performed, but to see someone die and then they come back, it has a whole nother thing than just, to me, turning water into wine, or um healing someone who is sick, or healing someone who is blind. That is, a different level. So I think the belief in Jesus only grew more after he was killed. um
And what we often forget, and I'm responding to your question, Facebook viewer, is this that the Jewish people, most of the Jewish people, thought that their Messiah was going to be a strong warrior.
mhm,
That's why a lot of them did not believe until after the resurrection that Jesus was the Messiah, because a lot of them believed that he was just another prophet.
mhm.
And it wasn't until then that they realized who he was. So I think we have to remember that too, that a lot of them didn't see him as the Messiah. Maybe even some of his followers and his believers didn't see him as the Messiah, but they saw him as
A leader.
a very powerful prophet.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. So yeah. So oh my goodness, I didn't see what time it was. So we've talked about the theories of atonement, and this is one of the final theories of atonement. It is the Christus Victor, and this essentially is Christ the victor, and that Jesus's death was the victory over sin, and sin and death. So basically, this theory is, in order for us to be victorious, Christ had to die. So, any thoughts, Reverend Melinda?
um, I think of all the atonement theories, that's probably the one that I believe the most,
Hmm.
because if Christ had not been victorious over the grave,
Mhm.
Where would we be? And I think about so many of the Easter songs that I learned growing up, where he's risen again, he was victorious over the grave,
Mhm.
all of those kind of things. And if he had not had that victory, I would not have my victory in the grace and mercy and love that I receive from him and from God. I would not have the God within me that I have within me in the Holy Spirit. All of that wouldn't have occurred. So I think that for Christians to be who we are, Christ had to be the victor.
Mhm.
And no, his victory wasn't in a big battle or a big war. His victory was over the grave,
Right.
so that now we will all not have to live in, and so that we won't have to live in sin, so that we know that we're forgiven, so that we know that we're loved. And I think about, it's so funny. I used to tease a friend of mine because they're Catholic, and I'd like, so what did you, when you were growing up, what did you say when you went to confessional? She was like, sometimes I didn't know. So sometimes I thought I was going to die. Sometimes I just made up a story. So the next time I could go and say, please forgive me for telling a lie. Going, oh my gosh.
Oh my
But then,
goodness.
then when you sit and think about how much you've been forgiven
Mhm.
by God and how much grace you've
Mm.
been given
Yep.
and then how much love you receive. And then the fact that that's never going to end. Even if you turn away, God doesn't turn away from you.
Mm.
And I think that's really the thing that this atonement says, that no matter what, you've got grace, mercy, and love on your side. And God is not going to turn away from you, even if you do. Because look at how he did Peter.
Mhm.
Peter denied him 3 times. Peter was the stone that the church was built upon.
Mhm.
You know, all the disciples basically deserted him and watched everything from afar except for Peter. But
Yep.
yet they were part of the foundation. They were the foundation of the church.
Yep.
They
And
helped to
they
spread that word.
right. And they did what they were told to do. They went out, and Jesus said, make believers of people. Um, and that's it took, because it made me think, even with this theory, because you're correct. Jesus died for us to be liberated, um, and not bound by um, sin. Because I know we talked about he was, when the high priest would go to atone, and slaughter the lamb um, before Passover. This is on a grander scale. This is what happened, and we Jesus is the highest of the high priest, and you know the high priest would do this for his flock, the people that were you know with him. And that's why the lamb, lamb was slain, animal was slain. um and Jesus died, for, some believe Jesus died for us so that we could live true lives, live our lives, but not in the sense that we're being forced. This is not a force, but you know that there is a what's the word I'm looking for? There is a power that loves you beyond measure, that you can't even fathom how someone um can love you through anything.
Right.
And I kind of want to say sight unseen. Uh, and on the natural side, Jesus hasn't seen us, but spiritually, Jesus has seen us and knows us, and God knows us. But so I want to say, loving someone you haven't seen before, you've never met, but you are willing to sacrifice yourself for them. And that's something that it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around, because there are people that I love beyond measure, but there are probably some things if they did to me, or that they did, I don't know if I could love them the same. But Jesus loves us the same regardless. And that's where I got from the Christus Victor atonement. Um,
Our
I had
our
another
Facebook follower said unconditional love, and I think
yes,
that's the biggest thing from Christ to Victory is the love is unconditional.
yes, and you don't,
And
in a sense, have to love Jesus back.
he liked what you said, Ray.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, you
He
don't.
says,
Yeah,
"Say that again, Ray." OMG. But it is. It's the unconditional love. And I think that's why how many different stories are in the gospel where the faith was so strong that they were healed or that
yeah.
someone they loved was healed. You don't and or I always think of the Roman soldier who said, "You don't need to come in my house. All you have to do is say the words."
Mm-hmm.
That faith is unbelievable.
Yeah. And it just like it's very hard to wrap your human mind around it, or my human mind around it, um because of humanness.
Right.
And I'm not saying that Jesus didn't get upset. Jesus got upset, of course. Jesus was still human, but it's just the level of love that is given to us is, I don't know. There is, it's beyond words. And if I
Right.
had words, I don't have words for it right now. Um, because I
And
just can't think. Mm,
our Facebook user makes a point when there is a misstep, love changes its face and voice. And I think that's with our
mm,
humanness.
mm-hmm,
And it's
mm-hmm.
amazing to me that when I make a misstep, God's love for me doesn't change.
And that's what I'm saying. It's just like no matter what I do, or even not even just the love, but and I think for me, it's like I know God's love doesn't change for me, but it's the guilt, depending on what it is. I think it's the guilt and the shame of I know I did something wrong. And that's why I said, even with the disciples, I would probably be in the back because I know that I betrayed you. So why should you even talk to me? Um, why should I even
Right.
be a part of this moment? I see you, and I know you're back, but also I did something wrong. Um, so I just looked at the time. So, any final thoughts on
I
tonight?
think I
This
think
book?
we've I think we've I've gotten my final thought in
Hmm.
that through all of this, God's love for us never changes. That's why Christ was the victor because of God's love for us. And now, after reading this, I'm going to tell you now that Adam Hamilton also did a book on the seven last words of Christ or the seven
Mm.
last sayings of
Oh yeah.
Christ. I'm going back and reread that one, okay,
I
guys?
think I'm going to have to. This book has definitely changed my view of certain things because I know we've heard this story time and time again, and whether you're a follower of Christ or not, you have heard this story, and whether you
Right.
believe it all, you believe none of it, some of it.
When
This book
I
has just changed my outlook on um just what Jesus had to go through. And while I believe, you know, this was something that was one of those moments that things were put in place and it's had to happen. Um, I believe that my mind was changed when I realized that some of the things that happened just weren't truthful, especially with the Sanhedrin and like just making up these stories. And it's like, I know it's a moment that had to happen, but it's like, if you are a respected leader, why are you lying? Like, in my brain it's like, well, you could have just killed him. Like, why did you have to
played the game you played,
play the game,
getting
make this
killed.
this mockery of him by putting him on the cross? And like, if you wanted him gone, say don't come back.
Right.
But like, it's just like, but why did you have to go to the extreme?
I Minister Joe wrote, this book study series has been transformative and educational. Thank you. Definitely will check out Adams Hamilton's book on the seven last sayings. I think the other
Right.
thing that this book made us do, or it made me do anyway, I'll own this. Not only did it show me new things, but it made me deal with emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It made me look at people's emotions around all of this. And it made me some of the questions in the book and some of the questions in the leader guide made me look at my emotions even. And that I think that was amazing to me too, because it's like I knew the crucifixion story,
Mm-hmm.
but I really didn't.
Right. That's how I
I mean,
felt. Like, I knew it, but it's like what this book made me do was see other people's emotions, because what really out of this lesson, what got to me was the part about the day after. And we don't think about the left the day after. Not even, I'm saying,
right,
not even left behind, but the day after, just something has happened. And I'll even venture, a month after, usually the day after, depending on what it is, people might call you. But what happens when you viewed, like, again, it's traumatic experience, you have viewed it, and people talk to you the day after or the week after, but then what do you do with that information or what you've seen? Because even
right,
the witnesses still saw Jesus resurrection, but then what do they do with that and what they still seen? It's like, I this book has definitely opened my eyes, and I hope, if you have not joined us for all 7 sessions, You can go back and watch the replay on Facebook. But also, if you can, grab the book and, kind of go along with, each of our lessons. And I would love to hear, your feedback if you haven't been able to um, join us through all the lessons. So yeah, I don't want to hold us. I know people. I don't want to hold everybody's time up, but Reverend Melinda, this was a great book. I'm glad you chose it.
Thank
Um,
you.
it has definitely been eye opening for me. Um, Kind of like the back end of just the story, because you can get caught up in the story, but you sometimes we don't realize Jesus' humanness um, during this time, and the pain and agony we hear about it. But when you read this book and you think about 24 hours, how monumental that is, that someone was put through all of this and still came out on the other side with still the same love in their heart for his people, which is amazing to me.
Yeah. The other thing is that the detail that the book went into.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and I'm like you, all this happened in 24 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, I know that that's what we're told,
Right,
but
but
I
you don't.
never,
You don't. It's
you
like
don't grasp it. But if
no.
you read this book, you're going to grasp that all of this happened in 24 hours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Wow. Again, that's very good book. Before we end, um, I want to. Oh, Reverend Melinda, do you want to do the announcements before I do the closing prayer?
our announcements are this is the last of this series, and we hope that you enjoyed it. I'm like Minister Ray. Let us know what you think. You can hit us up at info at mccbaltimore.org. We would love to hear what you think, or even just make your comments on Facebook. And next week, we start a new series, our Teach It, Preach It, the parables in the three Gospels. And what it is all the parables that we're going to study for the next 6 weeks are in three of the four Gospels. So the other thing is we don't just want you to come on Wednesday. The person listen to me not being able to talk. The person who is teaching or facilitating Bible study on Wednesday will be the person who brings the message on Sunday. So it's going to be repeated almost, but it's when we've done these series before, it's always so powerful on Sunday
Mm-hmm.
because you've really taken a deep dive into it on Wednesday. So we hope that you join us, and not just for Wednesday, but for Sunday service too. And don't forget to join us this Sunday for our virtual service.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, we may not be in the building, but we're still here and we're not going anywhere.
Nope. Thank you, Reverend Melinda. Uh, all right, our closing prayer. It comes from 1 Corinthians 15, verses 55 through 57. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.